Dennis, it's a prime time to have you on this show because you are well-versed in both college football and college basketball. So we'll let you decide where you want to start. Do you want to talk BYU football first or BYU basketball? You make the call.
Since I cover football, I think football first.
Okay, Let's start with the 7-0 Cougars from your national standpoint. I mean, you cover all 130-plus Division I FBS teams very closely. In your mind, why is BYU doing what they are doing right now?
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, you can put your finger on Texas. You can put your finger on Georgia, Alabama, whoever, Ohio State. I think BYU is the sum of their parts. You know, it's somebody different each game or unit each game. I was fascinated to find out that Jake Retzlaff is the leading rusher on this team.
By 9 yards.
By 9 yards.
7 games in.
And not by 9, you're right, by 9 total yards. Not exactly a Cam Newton or, a Tim Tebow or somebody like that, but that's my point. You just get it done any way you can get it done.
It's been wild, especially, last week's game was crazy. BYU having to make a comeback there. Oklahoma State's been interesting. They've underperformed. They performed well. And then we look at UCF. They played Iowa State.
Yeah.
Tough. Good defense from BYU and Iowa State. At the end, you just have to win. If you have an off day, you just have to win. And now BYU's 7-0.
Yeah, 269 yards rushing, I think, by Oklahoma State, that's where they pin their hopes on every year and had not done that well this year with Ollie Gordon II, but busted out. And, BYU, I guess, was fortunate to be there at the end. But they don't answer, they just, not how, but how many. And I think the next 2 games, I think UCF's going to get somebody because they've lost some excruciating games lately. Yep. And I do think they're pretty good, too. And if they don't get down on themselves, they're going to get somebody. And with BYU traveling, I think that'll be tough. And then Utah is just up in the air. I mean, it doesn't matter if Cam Rising is gone or not. The one time I went to that game, it set in my mind it was Urban's year, whatever that was, 04 when y'all went to the Fiesta Bowl.
The Snow Bowl.
That was not snow.
Oh, so
that
03 then.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so that's all I remember from that game. When people bring up great rivalries, I go, don't forget the Holy War.
Yeah.
People don't put that on the list.
One of the greatest games in the history of that was Lavelle Edwards' last game. Both teams didn't make a bowl game. BYU playing for 500. It was a great game. It does not matter. But Andy Ludwig, the offensive coordinator, down this week. Zach Wilson's younger brother. Isaac is the freshman starting quarterback. We're trying not to look ahead too much either because there's a bye week next week, and UCF's good. But, Utah's coming.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, I said before the season that I thought the Big 12 was the most fascinating conference because of all the new teams, and somebody was going to have to win it, and that team was going to go to the playoff. And this year, it was probably going to be a non-traditional team. And by that, I mean there's only 2 teams in this league with legacy championships, and that's Colorado and BYU. Well, BYU's in the running now, but not to say they won't make it. But think of if a Kansas State makes it through or an Iowa State makes it through. They never played for a championship. BYU won theirs, 40 years ago, which is still the only one. I keep coming to this. Still the only, how do we want to put it, not group of 5, not non-power 5 team to ever win it. Because when Army was winning those championships, that was like the SEC. So I think that's fascinating to me. Somebody's going to win it who probably doesn't have championship legacy, and what does that look like?
Dennis Dodd covers college football on the national level for CBS Sports. Going back to UCF and your point, BYU quarterback Jake Retzlaff said, UCF is the best 3 and 4 team in the country. Yeah. They look so good on film. Yeah. We've reviewed a ton of what they do. And BYU is an underdog right now by 1.5 points going to Orlando. So, I mean, what do you make of this matchup on Saturday when, like you said, UCF has just lost some really frustrating games? Do you expect them to show up with an added ferocity, or is there a big loss hangover for falling short against Iowa State?
I think that's the question, and I think that's the challenge for Gus Malzahn and those players. Is he going to let these last 2 games hang over their heads, or are they going to come out and say, hey, we got a chance to do some things here? The season's not over, and look at, we know we can match up with them. You just mentioned it, the BYU's underdogs. And that's a question I can't answer. We know everything's on the line for BYU. We know they're going to show up. But that defense for UCF, I think, has got question marks. And if they can, make a run there. I will say this, the travel, it's the weather. I don't know what the weather's going to be like, but going to Orlando anytime usually is very humid and kind of a shock to the system to players that aren't there. But BYU in its history has played everywhere, so that probably matters a little less than I make out to be. But as I said, when I saw this game come up, I said they're going to have somebody for somebody down the line.
Yeah. High 70s or low 80s for what it's worth.
And about 50% humidity. It'll be hotter than that.
That might be the combined line as well. Like it might be a high-scoring game. Who knows? Okay, so looking ahead, there's only 3 teams with 1 loss or fewer in the Big 12. BYU, Iowa State, both undefeated. Kansas State. Do you think one of those 3 teams wins the league? And let's play out how does the Big 12 get 2 in somehow?
Yeah, and look, the only teams out of those 3 that play each other, Iowa State and Kansas State play in the last day of the season in Farmageddon.
Yep, which is a great name, by the way.
Right, I love that. It was a marketing thing by somebody, but it's great. And that might be for a spot that probably will, it looks like now, be for a spot in the championship game. And BYU can, I don't want to say out of that maybe afford a loss and still be in the top 2, but you'd rather run the table, because obviously that champion is going to get in. Now, to get 2, that's something I've thought a lot about, because in the SEC alone, there's a chance to, like, for 4 or 5 teams to finish 10-2. And one of those teams at least isn't going to make it, because like if Vanderbilt is sitting there at 10-2 and has beaten Alabama but lost again. They play Texas this week. I don't think they're going to win that. What does that look like, against a second team from the Big 12? And if it happens, does the SEC react? Because they're making waves about getting automatic qualifiers. I think that would hurt a league like the Big 12. But I'm going to reserve judgment. I think the ACC's got a better chance to get 2 in with Clemson and Miami. Miami has a great chance to go 12-0 without playing a ranked team.
Wild.
This year. Yeah, wild.
Nice schedule.
And Clemson has done nothing but get better all season.
My understanding, too, with, how much does this person get? They still have to figure out all the rules on all this and who's going to sue who about what. What is the school giving versus what is the collective getting? Does the collective come under the school's purview? It's all still being figured out. Is this the most complicated, stressful last 3 or 4 years of covering college athletics you've had, given all the changes?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It started like in 2010 with that first round of realignment where the Big 12 almost collapsed and the Pac-12 was trying to grab them, and Nebraska, A&M, Missouri, and Colorado left. But in this round really started in July of 21 when we were at the SEC meetings, and word leaked out that Texas and Oklahoma were going to the SEC. We were with our phones, and we looked like cockroaches when you turn the light on in the kitchen like that. And then it just started again. And then you throw in really the collapse of the NCAA. We're witnessing it before our eyes, or lack of influence. The Alston decision, NIL, the portal stuff that I don't know if anybody foresaw that, or it's beyond free agency, because at least in free agency in the pros, there's a cap to it. This is whatever, again, we just talked about it. That number, $3 to $4 million, is the biggest I've heard for any player in any sport. Now, and none of us really know, by the way. Unless I see a contract or a family member tells me, I don't know. So we're just all estimating.
We learned from UNLV. You probably need that in writing, Dodd.
Right, exactly, yeah. So no, I have had days when I wake up and dread looking at my phone in the morning. What did I do? I'm serious. It's bad.
It is a wild time for sure in collegiate.
It's no
athletics.
fun when you dread your job. Yeah. So hopefully better times ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
As you look at the health of the Big 12 overall, there's this conversation that happens often about where the Big 12 falls in the pantheon of the Power Four. Are they the third best conference? Is it the ACC? And how far is the divide between the Big 10, the SEC, and then the ACC and the Big 12? How do you see that?
Well, the SEC and Big 10 are miles ahead of everybody else in revenue alone. I mean, they're talking about doing a scheduling agreement. They're talking about a non-conference game. They're talking about doing, non-con games. They're talking about they're basically partners right now. Last week they met with, I think the meeting itself was unprecedented. 2 conferences on their own meeting to like the Potsdam resolution to divide up Western Europe. How are we going to do this?
Just don't call it the alliance. And we'll
right? But I think, look, in terms of revenue, the ACC is slightly ahead of the Big 12. I don't think that even really matters right now. It's about how many teams you can get in to win championships. And as Brett Yormark said, when all this was happening, he told his presidents, he brought to them the ESPN deal. And even though it was below market, this is October of 22, he said, below market, we have to take this or we may not be a conference. And so he had the foresight, unlike George Kliavkoff, that might happen. So that $31.7 million that everybody's getting base is what saved this conference.
It's pretty gnarly. And with that new deal, goes through 31. Brett Yormark has talked about how at some point he's thinking maybe men's basketball is its own thing.
Yeah.
Do you think that'd be a smart move to have the TV rights specifically for this league, which is one of, if not the best league, Ken Palm and all the numbers in America, separate that contract in 31?
It's a unique idea. I've talked to people in the industry, and they're not so sure because there's a reason that these media revenue rights contracts go 80-85% football and 15 to 20% basketball. And I have been told flat out, if that happens, then what will happen with the rights holder, they'll just take football will make 15% less because they're not going to pay more for basketball. Now, Brett Yormark thinks that basketball is undervalued. He's really close with Adam Silver. Adam Silver's told him this is a great idea. Streaming is the future, which we've all heard. And he wants to do it. Now, again, this is in 2031. I should add that we're not going to have this Super League or Project Rudy until at least then. So I think we got status quo until then. But it's a unique idea.
Dennis, always great to talk to you and get your insights into the state of college sports. We wish you rest over the next few days.
And as a Kansas City guy, best restaurant we should check out?
Best restaurant? Wow. I think you're going to ask me.
$2 signs.
I thought you were going to.
Keep it simple.
Okay, I think you're going to ask me barbecue. But barbecue is Gates. I'm a sauce guy, so I love Gates. That's close.
Gates.
And Garozzo's on the northeast side. It's Italian, and it's really, really good.
Ooh, Gates and DeRozzo's.
Yeah.
Very nice. Awesome.
Now you're helping us out in the food front.
I try. Multi-talented. Kind of like these BYU players. Again.
We appreciate it, brother.
All
Thanks
right.
so much
Thanks.
for the time.
You bet.